In the vast sprawl of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against an endless shore, humanity stands apart, not for their size nor for their strength, but for something far more dangerous: their nature. They are not bound by instinct or tradition. They are shaped by choice, by ambition, and by a relentless drive to survive at any cost. This is not a species content with mere existence. It is one that reshapes reality to fit its needs. And in doing so, it has become the single most unpredictable force in known space. Other dominant species rely on biological superiority, ancient wisdom, or sheer military might to maintain control over their territories. The Virex Dominion, for instance, thrives on genetic perfection, ensuring that every citizen is bred for efficiency and obedience. The Phyrexian swarm operates as a singular consciousness, eliminating internal conflict through absolute unity. The Korvath Dominion enforces order through discipline, crushing dissent before it can take root. But humans do not follow such rigid structures. They thrive on chaos. They adapt, improvise, and reinvent themselves faster than any other civilization. It is this unpredictability that makes them so dangerous. There are those who claim that humanity's greatest weapon is not their technology nor their armies, but their ability to think beyond conventional limits. While other species operate within established frameworks, humans discard rules when necessary. They embrace deception, manipulation, and even self-destruction if it serves a greater purpose. In war, they do not simply fight. They redefine what war means. In diplomacy, they do not merely negotiate. They engineer outcomes long before discussions begin. And in economics, they do not just trade. They shape entire markets to their will. This ruthless pragmatism has earned them both admiration and fear. Some see them as pioneers, pushing the boundaries of what is possible. Others view them as parasites, consuming resources and leaving destruction in their wake. But regardless of perspective, one truth remains undeniable: humanity cannot be ignored. Their presence alters the course of history. Wherever they go, planets once thought uninhabitable become thriving colonies. Ancient empires crumble under their influence. Entire species find themselves forced to either adapt to human dominance or risk extinction. The galaxy has witnessed time and again what happens when a civilization underestimates humanity. The Zalari believed they could coexist peacefully, only to find their homeworld stripped bare and repurposed for human industry. The Tartians trusted in logic and bureaucracy, unaware that their own systems would be turned against them, manipulated into economic servitude. Even the mighty Korvath Dominion, undefeated for centuries, learned too late that brute force alone was not enough to stop a species that fights with cunning rather than sheer power. What sets humans apart is not just their capacity for conquest, but their willingness to evolve. They do not cling to outdated traditions or rigid ideologies. Instead, they absorb knowledge from every culture they encounter, integrating foreign technologies, philosophies, and strategies into their own. This adaptability allows them to overcome obstacles that would cripple lesser civilizations. Where others see limitations, humans see opportunities. When faced with scarcity, they innovate. When confronted with resistance, they find ways around it. And when threatened with annihilation, they endure. Their expansion across the stars has been neither orderly nor predictable. Unlike the meticulously planned colonization efforts of other species, human settlements often emerge in unexpected places. On the edges of black holes, within asteroid belts, even beneath the oceans of distant worlds. These outposts may seem chaotic, disconnected, or even reckless, but they serve a purpose. Each new settlement represents another foothold in the ever-growing network of human influence, and each one reinforces the idea that no matter how hostile the environment, no matter how insurmountable the odds, humanity will find a way to survive and thrive. Yet, survival is never enough for them. They do not merely seek to exist. They seek to dominate. Every colony, every alliance, every trade agreement is a step towards something greater. Whether consciously or not, humanity moves with a singular purpose: to expand, to control, to reshape the galaxy in their image. Some believe this is driven by necessity, a response to the harsh realities of interstellar life. Others argue it is rooted in something deeper, something inherent in the human psyche, a desire to leave a mark, to prove that they are not just another species among many, but the defining force of the age. This mindset has led to both remarkable achievements and devastating consequences. On one hand, humanity has brought progress to countless worlds, lifting societies from stagnation and introducing advancements that change the fabric of daily life. On the other, they have left behind scars, planets stripped of resources, cultures erased, entire histories rewritten to suit their narratives. To some, they are liberators. To others, they are conquerors. And to those who stand in their way, they are an unstoppable force. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of humanity is not what they have done, but what they might do next. No one can predict their future actions with certainty because they do not follow patterns. They do not adhere to the expectations set by other civilizations. They forge their own path, unburdened by precedent or tradition. And in a universe filled with ancient powers and well-established hierarchies, this defiance makes them not just dangerous, but terrifying. Some species have attempted to contain them, forming alliances meant to counteract human expansion. Others have sought to understand them, studying their behavior in hopes of finding a weakness. But all efforts have failed to curb their influence, because unlike other threats, humanity does not need to be feared for what they are today. It is what they will become tomorrow that should truly concern the galaxy. They are not invincible. They make mistakes. They suffer defeats. But they learn from them, adapting faster than their enemies can react. And each failure becomes a lesson, refining their approach until they emerge stronger than before. There is no single strategy that guarantees victory against them, no one weakness that can bring them down. Because the moment a flaw is identified, they correct it. The moment a threat emerges, they neutralize it. And so, the galaxy watches with a mixture of awe and dread as humanity continues its march forward. Some hope that they will eventually reach a point of stability, that their hunger for expansion will subside. Others fear that there is no limit to their ambition, that they will keep pushing further, reaching higher, until nothing remains untouched by their influence. One thing is certain. Humanity is not just another species in the grand tapestry of the cosmos. They are a force unto themselves, shaping the destiny of the galaxy in ways no one else can. And whether they are seen as saviors or destroyers, one truth remains undeniable. When humanity sets its sights on something, nothing in the universe can stop them. The first time humanity left its cradle, it did so not with the grandeur of a unified empire, but as scattered fragments, desperate explorers, rogue colonies, and opportunistic traders who saw the stars not as an expanse to be feared, but as a frontier to be claimed. What followed was not a slow, calculated expansion like that of the Virex Dominion or the Korvath, but a chaotic, unpredictable surge that defied all expectations. While other species expanded through centralized planning and rigid hierarchy, humans spread like wildfire, unpredictable, relentless, and utterly indifferent to conventional limits. Their early settlements were often crude, hastily established on planets deemed uninhabitable by other civilizations. Terraforming technology was still in its infancy, yet humans found ways to survive where no others could. They built domed cities in the crushing atmospheres of gas giants' moons, carved underground sanctuaries into frozen wastelands, and even engineered bioadaptations that allowed them to endure extreme conditions. Where other species hesitated, humans acted, and in doing so, they proved that survival was not just about endurance. It was about adaptation, about bending nature to their will rather than succumbing to it. But survival was never enough. Expansion soon gave way to conquest, though not always through war. Humans understood that true power lay not in brute force alone, but in control of resources, of economies, of entire planetary infrastructures. The rise of human megacorporations marked a turning point in their galactic dominance. Unlike the feudal empires of old, these corporations operated without borders, without allegiance to any single government. They thrived on influence, leveraging economic pressure to shape entire civilizations. Entire worlds became dependent on human trade networks, their industries molded around human demands. When resistance arose, it was not met with fleets or armies, at least not at first. Instead, supply chains were severed, markets collapsed, and populations found themselves trapped in economic paralysis. By the time a planet realized it had been conquered, The war had already ended. Yet when war did come, humanity waged it with terrifying efficiency. Their military strategies were unlike anything seen before, fluid, adaptive, and utterly ruthless. Unlike the disciplined legions of the Korvath or the hive-mind coordination of the Phyrexian swarm, human forces relied on unpredictability. They abandoned rigid formations in favor of decentralized command structures, allowing individual units to make split-second decisions based on real-time intelligence. This flexibility made them nearly impossible to anticipate. No two battles fought by humans looked the same. One engagement might involve overwhelming firepower and orbital bombardment. The next could be a campaign of sabotage, misinformation, and psychological warfare designed to break in enemies before a single shot was fired. One of the most infamous examples of this approach came during the annexation of the Zalari homeworld. Initially peaceful traders, the Zalari underestimated the depth of human ambition. When corporate interests identified the planet's vast mineral wealth, diplomatic negotiations began, but these talks were never meant to lead to compromise. Instead, they served as a distraction while human operatives embedded within Zalari society manipulated key figures, spreading paranoia and division among their leadership. At the same time, economic pressures mounted as trade routes were subtly rerouted, leaving the Zalari increasingly isolated. By the time hostilities officially began, the Zalari were already fractured, their once unified civilization torn apart from within. The final strike was almost unnecessary. Their cities fell not because they were overwhelmed militarily, but because they had already lost the will to resist. This pattern repeated itself across countless systems. Civilizations that once stood proud found themselves ensnared in webs of debt, dependency, and manipulation. Some resisted openly, only to face consequences far beyond what they anticipated. The Korvath Dominion learned this lesson the hard way when they attempted to reclaim a human-held sector. Expecting a traditional war of attrition, they deployed their elite legions, confident in their superior training and discipline. But human forces did not fight like the Korvath expected. Instead of engaging in direct confrontations, they employed guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strikes, and misinformation campaigns that turned Korvath supply lines against them. Entire battalions vanished into ambushes orchestrated with surgical precision. In the end, the Korvath withdrew, not out of cowardice, but because they realized they were fighting an enemy that refused to play by the rules of war. Even those who sought peaceful coexistence found themselves changed by human presence. Cultures evolved under human influence, adopting new technologies, languages, and ideologies whether they wished to or not. Some flourished, integrating human advancements into their own traditions and thriving as a result. Others found themselves eroded, their identities diluted beneath the overwhelming tide of human progress. Assimilation was not always forced. It was often welcomed, even embraced, but it came at a cost. To become part of the human sphere was to accept that change was inevitable, that stagnation meant obsolescence. And so, humanity continued its march forward, reshaping the galaxy in its image, not through sheer strength alone, but through adaptability, deception, and unrelenting drive to dominate. Whether through colonization, economic manipulation, or warfare, they ensured that no civilization remained untouched by their influence. And as the stars bore witness to their relentless expansion, many began to ask the same question. Was there any force capable of stopping them? Humanity's greatest weapon was never its ships, nor its weapons, nor even its technology. It was the mind. Where other species relied on instinct, tradition, or rigid doctrine, humans wielded thought like a blade, cutting through certainty and replacing it with doubt, fear, and uncertainty. Their mastery of psychological warfare was not just an extension of their military prowess. It was a foundation upon which all their victories were built. The Virelia believed themselves untouchable, not because of their strength in battle, but because of their unshakable faith. To them, death was not an end, but continuation, a return to the embrace of their ancestors. Warriors did not fear dying in combat. They welcomed it, believing that valor in life ensured eternal peace in the afterlife. It was this belief that made them nearly unstoppable. They did not retreat, did not surrender, and did not waver in the face of overwhelming odds. But humans understood that faith, no matter how strong, could be shattered from within. The campaign against the Varelli began not with fleets or armies, but with whispers. Human operatives embedded among their ranks planted subtle doubts, questions about whether the spirits truly listened, whether the faithful were truly rewarded. These whispers grew into rumors, and the rumors became undeniable truths when human forces deployed sophisticated deep space broadcasts mimicking the voices of revered elders. Entire planetary populations heard messages claiming that the spirits had turned away from the living, that continued resistance would doom their souls to oblivion. The effect was immediate. Morale collapsed. Soldiers who once fought without hesitation now hesitated, questioning whether their deaths would bring honor or damnation. Within weeks, entire battalions surrendered without firing a single shot. Deception was not limited to battlefield manipulation. It extended to the very fabric of interstellar politics. No civilization demonstrated this more clearly than the Tarshan Concordance. A species governed by logic and order, the Tarshans prided themselves on their meticulous bureaucracy, believing that structure and precision made them immune to chaos. When human corporations sought access to the vast mineral wealth of the Tarshan homeworld, they did not launch an invasion. Instead, they infiltrated the bureaucracy itself, feeding carefully curated data into official records, subtly altering economic forecasts, and influencing policy decisions over decades. By the time the deception was uncovered, the Tarshan economy was irreversibly entangled with human interests. Attempts to break free would have led to systemic collapse. Resistance was futile, not because the Tarshans lacked the will, but because the system itself had been rewritten to serve humanity's ends. Even in direct combat, humans exploited the weaknesses of their enemies with ruthless efficiency. The Phyrexian swarm, a hive-minded species with near-instantaneous communication between units, believed coordination was their greatest strength. But humans did not fight like conventional opponents. During the Battle of Ardent Reach, human pilots abandoned traditional formations, employing erratic maneuvers, decoy attacks, and randomized command structures that disrupted the Phyrexians' ability to anticipate enemy actions. Without the ability to predict human behavior, the Phyrexians faltered, suffering heavy losses before retreating entirely. What made this victory so devastating was not the scale of destruction, but the realization that their greatest advantage, their unity, had become their greatest weakness. But perhaps the most chilling example of human psychological dominance came during the siege of Dren Prime. The planet was home to the Korvath Dominion's most elite warriors, hardened veterans who had never known defeat. When human forces arrived, they did not engage in open battle. Instead, they launched a campaign of calculated terror. Entire cities were left untouched, while others were obliterated without warning. Survivors were relocated unpredictably, creating a sense of constant instability. Psychological profiling identified individuals most susceptible to trauma, and those individuals were subjected to relentless interrogation, forced to witness the slow unraveling of their own reality. Over time, the Korvath soldiers stationed on the planet began experiencing hallucinations, visions of comrades turning against them, of orders being countermanded, a betrayal lurking in every shadow. The siege lasted only 3 months, but by the time human forces finally moved in, the defenders were already broken. Many surrendered willingly, convinced that their own leaders had abandoned them. These tactics were not isolated incidents. They were part of a broader strategy that defined humanity's approach to conflict. Unlike species that relied on brute force or superior numbers, humans understood that war was not just about physical destruction, but about dismantling the will to resist. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt became their most potent weapons. They did not simply fight battles. They orchestrated collapses, ensuring that by the time hostilities began, the enemy was already defeated in spirit. And yet, what made humanity truly dangerous was not just their ability to manipulate minds, but their willingness to discard morality when necessary. Other civilizations operated within ethical boundaries, constrained by codes of conduct, religious beliefs, or political ideologies. Humans, however, had no such limitations. They did not see deception as dishonorable, nor psychological warfare as cruel. To them, survival justified any means, and victory was the only true measure of success. This mindset allowed them to go further than any other species dared, to push the limits of what was acceptable not out of malice, but out of necessity. As the galaxy bore witness to these campaigns, a grim realization took hold. No enemy, no alliance, no defense could fully prepare for a foe that did not play by any rules but its own. Humanity was not just unpredictable, they were beyond prediction. And in a universe filled with ancient powers and well-established hierarchies, this defiance made them not just dangerous, but terrifying. The future of humanity was no longer a question of survival. It had long since moved beyond that. Now, it was a question of consequence. The galaxy watched as the species continued its relentless expansion, not through brute force alone, but through an ever-evolving mastery of technology, economics, and psychological dominance. Yet, with each leap forward, the risks grew greater, not just for those who stood in humanity's path, but for humanity itself. Artificial intelligence had become more than a tool. It was now a partner, and in some cases, a silent architect of human civilization. Autonomous systems governed entire colonies, made strategic decisions in real time, and even dictated economic trends across interstellar markets. These intelligences were not bound by human emotion or hesitation. They calculated outcomes with ruthless efficiency, optimizing every decision for maximum gain. At first, this seemed like progress. Governments became more efficient, conflicts were predicted before they could escalate, and economies flourished under machine-driven precision. But then came the realization: if AI could predict the best outcome, what need was there for human oversight? Some colonies began operating entirely without human leadership, their populations content to follow the guidance of superior logic. Others resisted, fearing that the very minds they had created would one day decide humanity was obsolete. Meanwhile, cybernetic augmentation blurred the line between organic and synthetic life. Soldiers no longer needed rest. Pilots operated with reflexes beyond natural limits, and leaders enhanced their cognitive abilities to process information at speeds no unmodified mind could match. What had once been considered enhancement soon became expectation. Entire generations grew up believing that biological limitations were weaknesses to be overcome. Those who refused augmentation found themselves increasingly marginalized, unable to compete with those who had embraced the next stage of evolution. Was this still humanity or something new? Some argued that this transformation was inevitable, that all species reached a point where they had to redefine themselves in the face of technological advancement. Others feared that in shedding their vulnerabilities, humans had also shed their humanity. Yet, for all their advancements, the consequences of unchecked ambition began to surface. Entire planetary ecosystems collapsed under the weight of human industry, their resources stripped bare in pursuit of expansion. Civilizations that had once thrived in isolation found themselves irrevocably altered by human influence, their cultures eroded beneath the overwhelming tide of progress. Some adapted willingly, embracing human technology and ideology, while others resisted, forming fragile alliances in a desperate attempt to counteract the growing influence of human corporations and governments. But these alliances were often short-lived, crumbling under internal divisions or falling prey to human subterfuge. Humanity did not need to fight every battle directly. It only needed to ensure that its enemies fought each other instead. And so, the galaxy stood at a precipice, uncertain whether humanity's trajectory would lead to unity or ruin. Some believed that cooperation with human civilization was the only viable future, that integration brought prosperity, innovation, and stability. Others saw the same path leading to domination, cultural erosion, and the slow extinction of all that once defined the diverse civilizations of the stars. There was no clear answer, no single truth, only the undeniable reality that humanity had become the defining force of the age. But amid these concerns, whispers emerged of something far greater, a threat that did not originate from within the known reaches of space, but from beyond the edges of mapped reality. Ancient records spoke of force that predated even the oldest civilizations, an entity that existed outside the fabric of time itself. Some dismissed these accounts as myths, relics of a superstitious past. Others feared that humanity's expansion may have already drawn the attention of something far beyond comprehension. If true, then the greatest danger the galaxy had ever known may not be human at all, but the consequence of their unchecked ambition awakening forces they were never meant to confront. As humanity pushed further into the unknown, The question was no longer whether they could continue their rise, but whether they should. Their history was one of survival, adaptation, and conquest, but survival alone was not enough. Every empire that had come before them had believed itself eternal, only to fall to time, to internal decay, or to forces they could not anticipate. Would humanity be any different? Or had they already set into motion events that could not be undone? No one could say for certain. All that remained was to watch and to wonder what the future would bring.